Most people assume that the moment they stop fighting back and finally walk away, that's the moment the abuse comes to an end. But if you look at this through the lens of Carl Jung's psychology, a much darker truth emerges. The instant a narcissist realizes you're actually done, that's often when the real danger truly begins. You might find yourself wondering why, right when you finally summon the strength to choose yourself, everything spirals into something far more intense than any argument you've ever had with them before. Why does your silence set off a reaction that feels almost engineered to destroy your sense of peace, leaving you questioning whether you're the one losing your grip on reality? There's a specific, invisible final move they've been holding in reserve for precisely this moment, a psychological trap built not to win you back, but to shatter your trust in your own perception of what's real. What exactly is this hidden mechanism that turns your own nature into a weapon against you? And how do you learn to recognize it before it has a chance to work on you? We're going to walk through the mechanics of this particularly cruel final tactic and hand you the psychological understanding needed to spot it coming so that this time, when you walk away truly untouchable. Let's start with what we might call psychic starvation. Jung taught that human interactions aren't simply exchanges of words or actions, but genuine transfers of psychic energy. When two people form a bond, an unconscious bridge builds between them. In a healthy relationship, energy moves back and forth like a tide, nourishing both people involved. But in a narcissistic dynamic, that flow only moves in one direction. The narcissist, cut off from their own internal source of vitality because of a fractured sense of self, survives by siphoning energy from the people around them. In a very literal psychological sense, they are parasitic in nature. The moment you withdraw internally, that flow shuts off. You might still physically share the same house. You might still be cooking dinner together or riding beside them in the car. To anyone watching from the outside, nothing appears different. But in the invisible territory of the psyche, a famine has quietly begun. The narcissist starts to starve. That starvation triggers a primal, almost reptilian panic inside them. This isn't the panic of losing someone they love. It's closer to the panic of a drowning man realizing his oxygen supply has just been cut. This phase comes with an unsettling hypervigilance. You might catch them watching you with a newfound, almost predatory intensity, scanning constantly for those small micro-expressions, searching for any flicker of annoyance, fear, or adoration that would confirm they still exist somewhere in your emotional world. When they can't find it, the whole atmosphere in the room shifts. It grows heavy, charged with a kind of static tension that makes the hair on your arms stand up. This can happen while you're simply sitting across from them at dinner, eating quietly, thinking about a future that no longer requires their approval. You haven't said a single word, you haven't picked a fight. And yet the temperature in the room seems to drop for no clear reason. They sense your growing autonomy as a genuine threat. The question that comes next sounds casual, almost bored on the surface. What are you thinking about? But underneath, the tone feels more like an interrogation. This isn't curiosity, it's a sonar ping, sent out just to see if it bounces back to them. When you answer with a calm, nothing much, and they sense the honesty behind your indifference, their anxiety spikes sharply. They realize the screen they've been projecting themselves onto, you, has just been rolled up and put away. A narcissist can't see themselves directly. They can only catch glimpses of themselves reflected in your reactions. If you're angry, they feel powerful. If you're sad, they feel significant. If you're indifferent, they essentially cease to exist in their own mind. That existential terror is exactly what drives the next stage of their behavior. They need to provoke some kind of reaction, any reaction at all, just to prove to themselves they're still real. This is why the silence at the very beginning of the end feels so deeply unsettling. It isn't the peaceful quiet of resolution. It's the breathless hush of a predator crouching right before it pounces. They're testing the edges of your defenses, hunting for any crack in your resolve. It usually starts small, a backhanded compliment, a forgotten promise, a subtle violation of a boundary you only recently set. They're waiting for you to snap. They're practically praying for your anger because your anger reassures them that they're still at the center of your world. When you don't give them that anger, when you meet their prodding with the cool, impenetrable calm of someone who simply refuses to engage, you force them to face a void they've spent their entire life running from. This is the exact moment psychic starvation turns into genuine desperation. They realize the passive feeding is over. They can no longer simply absorb your energy quietly. Now they're going to have to extract it by force. There's a principle within Jungian thought known as the reversal of opposites. It suggests that any extreme psychological position eventually has to flip into its opposite in order to restore some kind of balance. The intensity of a narcissist's initial charm, that golden period when they seem to mirror your very soul and promised you the world, was never something sustainable to begin with. It was an extreme, a performance built entirely out of light, and that kind of light always casts a deep shadow somewhere behind it. Now that you've withdrawn your energy from them, that pendulum swings violently toward the opposite extreme. This isn't some gradual fading of affection, it's a sudden, jarring inversion of the entire relationship's reality. The person who once placed you on a pedestal now looks at you with a chilling blend of disgust and something close to hatred. This shift feels disorienting because it seems to happen without any rational cause behind it. You haven't done anything cruel, you've simply stopped participating in the game, and yet in their mind, your refusal to keep being a compliant source of validation reads as the ultimate betrayal. The psychological mechanism driving this is something called splitting. A narcissist genuinely cannot hold a nuanced, balanced view of another human being. To them, you're either the savior validating their false self, or you're the demon threatening to destroy it. There's no middle ground available to them. The instant you stop playing the role of savior, you're forced into the role of demon instead. They need to villainize you in order to make sense of the internal chaos your withdrawal is stirring up inside them. If you're good and you're leaving, that must mean they're the bad one, and their ego simply cannot tolerate that conclusion, so they rewrite the entire narrative almost instantly. Suddenly, you're the abuser, you're the cold one, you're the narcissist in their retelling. This kind of reversal often seeps into the mundane moments of daily life too. You might be getting dressed for work, wearing an outfit they once claimed to love, expecting the usual compliment, and instead they look at you with flat, distant eyes and sneer something like, "You're wearing that?" aimed with surgical precision right at your deepest insecurity. It's never really about the clothes. It's a probe, a way of searching for the wound, testing whether the new armor you've built can still be pierced. This hostility actually serves two purposes at once. First, it's an attempt to provoke whatever emotional reaction they're starving for. If they can't get your love anymore, they'll settle for your pain instead, because pain is still a form of attention. Second, it functions as a projection of their own self-loathing. Jung observed that people tend to project their own shadow qualities onto others. The narcissist feels hollow, worthless, and fraudulent on the inside. So when they look at you, someone who's slowly finding their own strength and authenticity, they feel a burning envy. They want to spoil whatever progress you're making. They want to pull you back down into the same mud they're standing in. The shift from idealizing you to devaluing you is total and absolute. You'll likely notice your shared history being rewritten in real time right in front of you. Memories that once felt sacred between you get twisted into evidence of your selfishness or incompetence. They'll deny ever saying things you clearly remember them saying. They'll insist you did things you know you never did. The gaslighting takes on a sharper, more hostile edge during this phase. It's no longer about creating simple confusion, it's about asserting dominance. This stage is especially painful because so many empathic people cling tightly to the memory of who this person used to be, at least on the surface. You might find yourself asking, where did that person go? Jung would likely answer that the person you're mourning never actually existed the way you believed they did. What you saw was the persona, the mask. What you're witnessing now, this cold, vindictive presence, sits much closer to the true reality of their undeveloped self. The mask hasn't just cracked and fallen away, it's been completely burned up in the heat of their own rage. When a narcissist realizes they can no longer control your inner world, they shift their focus to the next available battlefield, your reputation. Jung wrote extensively about what he called the collective shadow. The idea that entire groups of people can get swept up in unconscious waves of shared emotion and darkness. A narcissist understands this dynamic almost instinctively. They know that if they can successfully isolate you, they can weaken you significantly. If they can paint you as the unstable one to everyone around you, your truth will start sounding like the ravings of someone unreliable. This is the Whisper campaign, a strategic, preemptive strike designed to dismantle your credibility before you've even had a real chance to speak for yourself. It usually begins slowly, often before you're even fully aware that the relationship has actually ended. They start planting small seeds of doubt in the minds of your friends, your family, your coworkers. They rarely start with blatant lies. Instead, they lead with feigned concern, "I'm really worried about her," they might say to a mutual friend, shaking their head with a practiced, sorrowful expression. "She's just been acting so erratic lately. I think she might be having some kind of breakdown." This framing is devastatingly effective because it positions the narcissist as the caring, long-suffering partner and you as the problem that needs managing. By the time you reach out to that same friend for support, the well has already been poisoned. Your anger, your tears, your completely justified reaction to being mistreated, all of it now gets filtered through the lens the narcissist has already carefully constructed. "See, there she goes again," people think. "He was right. She really is unstable." This isolation isn't just a side effect of their behavior. It's the actual goal. A narcissist fears exposure above almost anything else because they know you hold the keys to their secret self. You've seen behind the curtain. To prevent you from ever sharing what you know, they have to discredit the witness first. They recruit unwitting proxies, people who get manipulated into unknowingly doing the narcissist's bidding. These recruited agents are often genuinely good people who've been deceived by a skilled manipulator. They believe they're helping a friend in need without realizing they're actually participating in a coordinated psychological siege against you. You might physically feel this shift when you walk into a workplace or a family gathering. You haven't done anything wrong, and yet the atmosphere sours the moment you cross the threshold. Conversations stop abruptly, eyes dart away, the air feels thick with unspoken judgment, making you feel like an outsider in a community you once belonged to comfortably. This is the collective shadow in action. The narcissist has successfully projected their own toxicity onto you, and the group has unwittingly absorbed the burden of their sins. This kind of triangulation is designed to destabilize your sense of what's real. When everyone around you seems to be aligning with the narcissist's version of events, you start doubting your own sanity. Am I the crazy one, you find yourself asking? Maybe I'm remembering everything wrong. This self-doubt becomes the narcissist's most powerful weapon of all. If they can get you to mistrust your own perception, they don't even need to be physically present to maintain control over you. Your own mind becomes the prison keeping you trapped. But there's an even deeper, more troubling reason behind this entire campaign. The narcissist feeds on drama, on conflict, on the phone calls and interventions that follow. All of it supplies them with a renewed sense of importance. They become the conductor of this chaotic orchestra. Watching you struggle to defend yourself against accusations that barely make sense gives them a temporary surge of power that fills, at least momentarily, the void left by your withdrawal. Understand that none of this is truly personal, even though it feels intensely personal while you're living through it. It's tactical. It's a fortress they're constructing to hide their own shame. They're terrified that if people actually looked closely at them, they'd see the emptiness underneath. So instead, they build a bonfire out of your reputation to distract everyone from the darkness sitting inside themselves. Just as you're steeling yourself for continued conflict, bracing against the insults and the smear campaign, the wind suddenly shifts direction entirely. The narcissist stops attacking. The rage evaporates, replaced by a devastating display of broken vulnerability. The phone stops ringing with threats and instead falls silent or starts ringing with soft, apologetic whimpers. This is the phase of false surrender, and for an empathic person, it's infinitely more dangerous than their anger ever was. When a predator bares its teeth, your survival instinct knows to run. But when a predator bares its throat instead, your nurturing instinct tells you to stay. Jung warned that the greatest danger to the soul often doesn't arrive dressed as a monster, but as a wounded child in need of saving. The narcissist understands the architecture of your psyche better than you might understand it yourself. They've spent the entire relationship carefully mapping your emotional terrain, and they know exactly where your instinct to rescue others is located. They know you can withstand their cruelty because you've built a fortress of righteous anger to protect yourself against it. You can tell yourself they're simply a bad person, and that belief gives you the strength to walk away. But they also know you cannot withstand witnessing their suffering. Seeing the person you once loved in visible pain, seemingly broken under the weight of their own actions, bypasses your logical defenses entirely and strikes directly at the core of your empathic nature. Jung spoke of the archetype of the wounded healer, a pattern often found in empathic people where there's an inherent drive to heal others as a way of unconsciously addressing one's own unresolved wounds. The narcissist exploits this by shifting into the archetype of the eternal child. This isn't a mature adult acknowledging a genuine mistake. This is regression. They strip away the adult persona that's been tormenting you and present themselves instead as a lost, helpless figure adrift in a dark world. They stir up a primal parental instinct within you. You stop seeing the abuser standing in front of you. Instead, you see a frightened person who simply needs guidance. This shift often occurs precisely when you have one foot already out the door. Maybe you finally packed a bag, or maybe you've gone an entire week without any communication. They're crying over the loss of their control and the terrifying prospect of their own emptiness. They might finally admit to things they denied for years. I know I've been awful. They might sob, staring at the floor with practiced shame. I'm broken. I need help. I'm going to start therapy. I finally understand what you were trying to tell me all along. Please don't give up on me now, right when I'm finally ready to change. The pull to believe them can feel magnetic, because it validates everything you desperately wanted to believe throughout the darkest years of the relationship, that they're actually capable of change, that your love wasn't wasted, that there's a good person buried somewhere underneath all that trauma. You witness their pain, and your own empathy fires in a chaotic wave of shared suffering. You feel their anguish almost as if it were your own. The armor you painstakingly built during the angry phase starts dissolving in the acid of their tears. What you're actually witnessing here isn't a real transformation, it's a tactical retreat. In military strategy, a feigned retreat is used to lure an opponent out of their fortified position and into open ground, where they become far easier to defeat. By playing the victim, they're inducing you to lower your defenses. They're asking you to drop your shield just long enough for them to slip back inside the walls one final time. And once they're back inside, they don't spend that time healing. They reconnoiter. They search for weaknesses in your newly established boundaries. They study your growing confidence, looking for ways to dismantle it more effectively next time around. This often shows up in very physical ways too, like a knock at your door late at night. They stand there looking disheveled and desperate, maybe smelling faintly of alcohol, maybe looking like they haven't slept properly in days. They might hand you a letter or slump against the doorframe, appearing smaller and more fragile than you've ever seen them look before. They suddenly start pouring out stories about their childhood, their fears, their emptiness, topics they guarded fiercely throughout the entire relationship. They place their life in your hands with a quiet whisper. I have nowhere else to go. You're the only one who truly understands me. That statement is a heavy, poisoned crown. It elevates you to the position of soul savior, the only person capable of fixing this broken soul in front of you. It's intoxicating to the ego of anyone wired as a natural healer, but it's a lie. They don't actually want you to heal them. They want you to carry them instead. There's a profound difference between the two. Healing requires their own active participation and their own willingness to sit with discomfort. Carrying only requires your strength and your ongoing sacrifice. If you fall into this trap, if you open the door and let them back in, the cycle doesn't simply reset itself, it accelerates. The moment you offer comfort, the moment you say, okay, let's try again, or I forgive you, the entire power dynamic shifts violently back in their favor. The tears dry up with almost miraculous speed. The vulnerability hardens back into arrogance. The promises of therapy get forgotten, delayed, or dismissed as unnecessary now that things are supposedly good again. And the abuse returns, often worse than before, because now they know exactly what it takes to break you open. They've learned that your boundaries are permeable, that your no actually means convince me harder, and that your empathy functions as a leash they can tug on whenever they sense you drifting away. They're counting on your inability to walk away from someone visibly in pain. They're holding their own emotional state hostage and blaming you for triggering it. If you leave, I might hurt myself. If you go, I have nothing left. My life is over without you. This is emotional blackmail dressed up as despair. It becomes the ultimate test of your own psychological growth. Can you witness suffering without taking personal responsibility for causing it? Can you watch someone drowning without jumping in to drown right alongside them? Jung taught that we must learn to separate our own psyche from the psyche of other people. Your pain belongs to you to carry. Their pain is the direct result of their own choices and their own unresolved shadow. Rejecting their surrender can feel like an act of cruelty. It feels counterintuitive to everything you believe about yourself as a caring, loving person. But this particular kind of cruelty is actually the highest form of love available to you, love for yourself, and ultimately the only real truth you have to offer them. Breaking free from narcissistic control leads to psychological immunity, a state of emotional detachment, self-awareness, and inner strength. Instead of absorbing their chaos, you become an observer with clear boundaries. True healing comes from integrating your own strength, protecting your peace, and reclaiming your identity without becoming consumed by anger or the past. A sovereign nation has borders. A sovereign nation maintains an army to defend those borders. A sovereign nation doesn't allow invaders to burn its crops down. This entire process of integration creates a state that goes far beyond simple resilience. Resilience is merely resisting a shock and remaining fundamentally the same afterward. But this journey demands something greater than that. The capacity to absorb a shock and emerge stronger, more complex, and more genuinely alive because of it. It's a form of psychological alchemy. The abuse you endured wasn't only damage, it was the intense pressure required to calcify your boundaries into something impenetrable going forward. You're now stronger, sharper, and more awake than someone who's never walked through a fire like this one. You've developed a kind of sonar for detecting inauthenticity in others. You can spot a manipulator from across a crowded room, not because you're paranoid, but because you've studied the anatomy of the lie firsthand. When you eventually cross paths with them again, or see their name pop up on a screen, the reaction is shocking in how absent it is. In the old days, your heart would have hammered against your ribs, palms sweating as you rehearsed exactly what to say. Now you feel nothing at all. It's hollow, quiet, and neutral. You hear their words, and they sound like a foreign language you used to speak fluently but have long since forgotten. You might look at them and think, how fascinating that they're still running that same old script. You might witness the cycle of idealization and devaluation playing out with someone new, and instead of jealousy, you feel a distant, impersonal pity instead. You see the frightened child hiding behind the tyrant. You see the tragedy of an entire life spent chasing reflections instead of substance. You might respond with something simple like, I hear that's your opinion, and then simply walk away. This isn't a technique you're performing. This isn't gray rocking as a survival strategy for getting through dinner. This is simply a state of being now. You're not holding your breath anymore. You're breathing entirely different air. You've moved into a reality where they no longer function as a defining force in your life. This immunity tends to extend far beyond just the narcissist, too. It permeates every corner of your life. You stop tolerating toxic bosses. You stop entertaining one-sided friendships. You stop explaining your life choices to family members who seem committed to misunderstanding you no matter what you say. You've learned the economy of your own energy. You start treating your peace as a finite, precious resource, one that isn't to be squandered on bad investments anymore. You've become what Jung might call the integrated warrior. You can love deeply, but you love with your eyes wide open now. You can give freely, but you give from a place of overflow rather than depletion. You've accepted the sometimes terrifying truth that you're ultimately alone inside your own mind, and you've transformed that mind into a sanctuary instead of a battlefield. That dirtiest final move, the projective identification, the smear campaigns, all of it was designed to shatter you into 1,000 pieces, so the narcissist could rearrange those pieces into a mosaic that pleased them, but it failed. Instead, the pressure forced you to gather up those scattered pieces and fuse them into something unbreakable. You haven't just survived a difficult relationship. You've graduated from a brutal school of psychological awakening. The narcissist remains trapped inside their own cycle, forever hunting for the next source of supply. But you've become the source of your own life force. You've turned the lead of your trauma into the gold of genuine consciousness. You are free, and in the truest Jungian sense, you are finally, terrifyingly, beautifully raw. The moment a narcissist realizes you're truly done is indeed dangerous. But it's also the birth canal of your authentic self emerging. We've traveled together through the entire landscape of that final move, from the psychic starvation and the smear campaigns to the weaponized pity and the projective identification, and you now hold the full map of that battlefield. Jung reminded us that the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. You were never meant to serve as fuel for someone else's broken ego. You were meant to be a sovereign being in your own right. The narcissist's greatest fear was never that you would leave. It was always that you would finally see them clearly. Now you do. When you stand in that sovereign silence, immune to their projections, you hand back the shame that never belonged to you in the first place. You leave them to wrestle with their own shadow while you step forward into the light of your own conscious, self-directed life.